All right, everybody, welcome on into the Auburn Daily Show, the Thursday edition of the Auburn Daily Show. Lance Dawe, Matthew Jacobs hanging out here with you on this beautiful Thursday afternoon in Auburn, Alabama. I don't normally say that, by the way, Matthew. I don't know if you've listened to me, how much I've and how much I've done the show. I don't just start the show off just talking about the weather just to say so. Normally, unironically, whenever we start shows, I look outside and it's just absolutely perfect weather. So a great day to talk about post-spring football as the Auburn Tigers are getting ready to take on the offseason. I'm sure fans are as well. It's going to be a fun time with the transfer portal opening up this Saturday. Going to be a lot of moving and shaking. I think with Auburn's roster, both guys moving in, both guys coming out as well. It's going to be a really, really fun time today. On today's episode of the Auburn Daily Show, we are going to be discussing the positions that the Tigers need out of the transfer portal. Going to go through the several places that Hugh Freeze identified as potential spots for the Tigers to kind of aid with depth or maybe even get a starter in. Also today, we're going to be discussing expectations for Auburn football season. Just going to kind of give our very kind of shallow thoughts on what this upcoming schedule looks like, because recently you wrote about it, Matthew, over at auburndaily.com, just talking about how Paul Feinbaum made some comments about how, Auburn currently still has the expectations that he's held pre-spring, and until they get a quarterback, things may not change. So Matthew, want to kick things off here with something that you and I discussed on Tuesday at length, talking about positions that the Tigers need to fill in the transfer portal. Quarterback is the starting point here. It's probably the topic of conversation for a lot of different folks. Robbie Ashford, Holden Gariner, TJ Finley, Jackson Barkley as the walk-on there. You and I discussed on Tuesday point blank, don't really feel confident about any of these guys, and it seems like Auburn's going to be going after some different guys in the transfer portal. In fact, we wrote about it here at Auburn Daily. They've already reached out to somebody.
Yeah, Chance Nolan, the guy we talked about Tuesday from Oregon State. So obviously he moves up the board. He'd be a great get. I don't know if that's going to be the guy or not, but we did, in fact, reach out to him. So there's going to be that to play with. Moving up my board, also I have the Duke quarterback, Riley Leonard, current Duke quarterback. We should start saying that, current Duke quarterback, Riley Leonard. He's an Auburn fan, wants to be at Auburn. Could see both of those guys coming if we wanted to go to. Cincinnati's Evan Prater is moving up the board, just like you talked about on Tuesday. His size and his physical gifts are perfect for Auburn. And then, of course, there's the Twitter mill, the social media rumor mill is rocking and rolling about a young man out of NC State named MJ Morris. I'm sure you've seen that. It's probably just smoke and no fire at this point. I think it's fans' wishful thinking. But man, what a great get he would be for the Auburn program if that were a possibility. With that being said, on people who are moving up the board, there's got to be people that are moving down the board. I'm going to go ahead and move Spencer Sanders, the Ole Miss guy, pretty much off the board. He's fairly happy, from what I understand, on campus at Ole Miss, even as a number two. And Casey Thompson really believes, his family really believes that he's going to go into spring and can win that job, at Nebraska.
And there you have it. Several guys that Auburn could be taking a look at. But as you said, Matthew, some guys moving up your board, moving down them. I would love to have Leonard. I would love to have Prater. MJ Morris is an interesting name, former 4-star quarterback out of Carrollton, Georgia. He's a guy that, stepped into the fire last season. I believe played in instead of Devin Leary's injury at times last season, if I'm not mistaken. I'm going to need to see a lot more there before we jump on the Twitter bandwagon of, hey, what's this guy doing? I remember seeing an Instagram post a couple of weeks ago about like projecting starting quarterbacks for Auburn. And this was like an Auburn fan page, and it was just going through different ones. And I saw MJ. I'm like, what? Who is this guy? It was just kind of out of left field. So we'll keep an eye on all different guys heading into the portal on Saturday. I would highly encourage you guys to make sure you are staying tuned to auburndaily.com. For all the different pieces that we're going to be having up there about the different quarterbacks coming and going through the portal. Who knows? Maybe, and I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just theorizing here. Auburn probably will have a quarterback enter the portal at some points, considering Hugh Freeze has been adamant about the fact that they want to bring in one. You and I discussed it on Tuesday. Is Finley that guy? We don't know. Just going to have to see. Again, I'm not predicting anything. I'm just saying that I think it's on the table for sure. So quarterback is a position that I think the Auburn Tigers need to take a look at in the portal. You've also got edge, which has been one of the thinnest positions on Auburn's roster. If I'm not mistaken, the new roster for the Tigers has the edge position listed as a jack position. You've got Keldric Faulk. You've also got Vanderbilt transfer Elijah McAllister. You don't really have a lot of depth here in terms of like quality. Hey, I could see this guy either starting and getting into the rotation. I believe there's a 4-star freshman in Brenton Williams that's also going to probably rotate into this 2 deep. But right now, Matthew, this is a spot on the roster. Hayden Bryce as well. I forgot to mention him. This is a spot on the roster where Auburn needs to pick somebody up that is not like this is a crazy quality name, but like you get him and you say, all right, this will help us not be as worried about this position heading into the fall.
Well, you're absolutely correct. You stole every name that I had there except for one. but there's a guy out of Texas sitting there who just declared yesterday. We broke it last night on auburndaily.com. Derek Brown, what a great name for an Auburn football player. I don't know where I've heard that before, but it sounds like a great name. He's out of Texas. He's 6'5", 210, 220. Pretty stacked, really fast for his size. I'll give him that. He's Keldric Faulk's kind of ability. A little bit older than Faulk, not quite old enough for what we're looking for, but we're just trying to add quality depth here. Who knows? He was the number 31 outside linebacker prospect in the country, and just a beast. He's not leaving because of a playing time issue or anything else. He really wasn't a fan of Texas going there. He really wanted to go to Baylor, and now he's saying he wants to kind of test the SEC waters out. So that's just the first of what I think is going to be an influx of quality pass rushers coming from outside the SEC who are going to want to be inside the SEC, because there is some concerns there. Like you said, after McAllister, who hasn't looked great in the spring, he looks like he's grown, but I mean, he is obviously I don't know what you call it, the team leader at that position due to his age and how many games he's played in the SEC. Keldric Faulk is all world, but that's even with, you got to take it into account. He had thumb surgery. He played all spring with his thumb wrapped up. He wasn't 100%, and he's still like a beast. I didn't see much of the other freshman, Benton Williams, but what I did notice missing was Dillon Brooks. Dillon Brooks was a guy that everybody was on about prior to spring. That's all I kept hearing was Dillon Brooks has improved, put on weight, blah, 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 blah. By the middle of spring, there was nothing said about Dillon Brooks, and by the end of spring, Dillon Brooks is not looking all that hot. So I don't know. It's a huge question mark at this point, but that's something that should readily be available in the portal for Auburn's, when they choose to go there. It's like the quarterback. These two positions aren't if. They're going to have to be when. Even if they don't get the guys they want, they're going to have to make a play for the edge for sure. They're going to have to make a play for it.
Yeah, very, very good point there about just Auburn needing these positions, not necessarily wanting depth at these positions. They're going to have to go out and get somebody if they want to kind of stay on track. You're right. Dillon Brooks is somebody that I didn't mention, somebody that, like you said, we just haven't heard a lot about, which is just kind of surprising, to be honest with you, just based on the hype that he had coming out of high school. And I don't want to say he's not panned out, because we don't know. All of a sudden he could turn it around in the fall and be somebody that's, really valuable for Auburn, but we'll just have to see there. So edge, another really big position. Go ahead.
And not to beat a dead horse there, but Jeffrey Imba was a guy who was switching over to kind of the end edge position there, and he did not look great in spring practice. So I don't know where that one's going to go either. So you're really they keep trying to add depth with what they've got, but it's just not there. It's a question mark, like you said.
Yeah, it's something else that we have to think about here. Excellent point is whenever that portal opens up on Saturday, Auburn's probably going to try and get as many people as they possibly can over the 48 hours there over the weekend. But there are also players that Auburn has on roster that are going to enter. And I think Auburn fans need to be prepared for some names popping in the portal on Saturday. Third position here, the offensive line. This has been a position that I think Auburn fans, you talk about beating a dead horse. I mean, this is a position that Auburn fans have whined and complained about, rightfully so, for what feels like years now. And it's finally starting to look like a comparable product out there, like a coherent product, I should say. It looks like the offensive line actually understands what they're doing. Every single time I think about this offensive line, I think about the Georgia game last year, and I use the word coherent. Because it just does not seem like at times that line got it. got much of anything, to be honest with you. So they've got an interesting group here after bringing in 3 different transfers that I think are all going to start for the Tigers: Dillon Wade, Avery Jones, and Gunner Britton. I think that'll be your left tackle, center, and right tackle. Your guard spots are the interesting ones here, Matthew, because you've got Jeremiah Wright and Tate Johnson, 2 different players that are older on Auburn's roster that could contribute. But you've also got a guy like Connor Liu, who was working at guard in the spring game. I don't necessarily know if that's the approach Auburn wants to take this upcoming year. Kind of walk me through what you're thinking about this offensive line and where Auburn needs to go.
Yeah, there's also a couple other freshmen they're playing pretty well at that position, and one that's supposed to be all world coming in the summer, so let's not discount that. But Hugh Freeze likes to have 16 scholarship offensive linemen on his team. That's his pattern. He's at 16 right now. We're going to see, I'm thinking three go and 3 come in, possibly 3 go and 4 come in. I'm not going to name names on either one of those because I think at this position, you're not looking for number ones. You're looking for guys from different conferences that are going to come in and be high number 2s. They're going to be better number 2s than what we have. And so, like I said, I'm hoping for better 2s. I think they're hoping for better 2s because I think the offensive line, you mentioned it, you brought up the Georgia game, which was horrible thing for you to do for Auburn fans. That was just mean. But the offensive line is kind of, if this whole team, if you stay at the starters, this whole team is sneaky good. But once you get past the starters, it starts to go downhill a little bit. Now, well, or a lot in some positions, like we just said, the edge. But the offensive line did look good. I think they're going to look good, and they're going to have some great tailbacks running behind them. But however, there's going to be three or four gone, 3 or 4 in. That's just the way it's going to be. And I don't know who that would be, but it's not going to be the names you mentioned as being the starting 5. That's for sure. Yep. And Connor Liu's not going anywhere.
So I think you made a couple of really good points there. And it kind of ties back into something I don't know if I necessarily noted in my practice observations articles that I did through this spring. With the first team, you get really excited about the offensive line that Auburn trotted out during pace drills. As the second team offensive line, you're like, okay, maybe got some pieces here that'll be good in the future. By the time you half of that second team and that third team, it was just like, this is not where Auburn wants to be right now.
It was the old offensive line.
Exactly. In terms of quality depth. That's the point you made there that I want to harp on here. It's about getting the quality depth, not just bodies in the room, but people that can actually make an impact based on where they're at in the roster. You don't need to have third string players playing high 2s, like you said. You need to be able to have more quality depth there that can kind of help aid things if what happened last year happens again, which is just injuries ravishing the O-line across the board. So Auburn maybe shedding some of the fat, I should say, and getting, which is interesting considering the position, and getting some more guys in, like you said, from maybe some Power 5 conferences that are not looking to step in and be starters, maybe compete for a job if they're good enough to take it from one of these guys, which I would be surprised if they were able to take it from one of the tackles. But I don't think that's what Hugh Freeze is looking for. He's looking for guys that can be those number 2s and step in when needed. So offensive line, I think, we saw a lot of movement. We saw a lot of movement in the first portal period. If you are sitting here saying, hey, 3 or 4, potentially, maybe cut some guys out, maybe bring some guys in. The movement's not done. I think Hugh Freeze is trying to solidify this position as best as he possibly can before he enters the offseason. Final position here, Matthew, which is the other side of the line here, I believe is what we were going to discuss. Auburn's defensive line, I think we may talk about safeties for a second if you'd like to do that as well, if you've got anybody on the board that I've just missed here. But you look at this defensive line, what you and I discussed on Tuesday, I think is going to be a topic of conversation for Auburn fans, not because of what happened during the spring game, but because of what happened last year, which is, can Auburn use the guys that are on roster to stop the run? And it looked like at times on Saturday, that offensive line that we were just praising was pushing Auburn around quite a bit in the rain. This defensive line, I think, maybe needs a little bit more juice, but I don't know if Auburn's looking to get even more than 2 bodies here. What are your thoughts?
I think Auburn fans need to be prepared for the attrition that's going to happen. I think they're going to get scared when you see how many people leave the wide receiver room, defensive line room, and the offensive line room going to this team just to build the team that we need to build. You want to win football games. This is the way it's going to be from now on.
Yeah.
So until Hugh Freeze gets what he wants and then starts building what we hope is a dynasty. The defensive line is the exact same as the offensive line for me, except that I'm terrified. This is really the only position on the football team that I'm terrified about. They could not make a tackle to save their lives on A-Day. Virtually no. Of course, once again, we're going to give them credit. It was a very vanilla, non-schemed defense, but they couldn't tackle to save their lives. They couldn't get a pass rush to save their lives. And that was disappointing to me because I was really hoping prior to spring, I think you were too, we were hearing great things about this defensive line. And then you had the linebackers, and they weren't going to be good, maybe or maybe not. But the defensive backs were going to be all world. Well, the defensive backs they're all world. The linebackers look a heck of a lot better than you think they were going to look. It's the defensive line that fell away. And so I think we're going to bring, once again, I'm going to say there's going to be an influx of quality upperclassmen enter the portal that are going to want to come play in the SEC, and they're going to get the opportunity to. And there's going to be guys who can tackle and guys who are not afraid to hit and can clog holes and do what they're supposed to do. To just be flat honest, I don't have any names because there's just going to be so many of them to choose from. And I'm not going to say any of the names of the guys I think are going to leave. But I think, once again, you're looking at 3 or 4 on the defensive line. 2, I'm going to say, I'm going to step out and say 2 for sure are going to leave. And I'm thinking 3, possibly 4 are going to end up leaving to the portal. And we're going to bring 2 or 3 good ones back in and add some depth. And then this defensive line is going to get scary again. We're hoping. Instead of being scary, it's going to get scary.
You talk about the wide receiver room, and I'm not going to try and put you on the spot here, but I do kind of want to help you like flesh that thought out for me. I'm not saying, hey, pick names and say, well, this guy's bad and I think he'll enter. This guy's bad, I think he'll enter, unless you just feel like doing that. But what does this wide receiver room need for this Hugh Freeze offense to be successful in year 1? What do they need out of these guys? Maybe some new guys through the portal.
Sorry, I'm we talked about this earlier on a different occasion. I'm the one guy, the outlier here, that doesn't believe they need to get a wide receiver out of the portal. I believe there's some quality wide receivers on staff. That's the room they're going to have to cut down. There is a lot of wide receivers on this football team right now. There's not a room for them. We have depth on top of depth. And with this running game, really, how much passing is going to be there to go around? You got to take that into account. So I think they parsed that room down a good bit, and that's where some of these scholarships are going to come from to bring in some other guys. But I'm not sure they're even. I mean, let me quantify that. If there's some great fourth wide receiver that is just lights out that could come in and possibly be a starter, you'd be dumb not to try for him. Okay, if he's in the portal, I just don't see that. He never mentioned it that I recall. Freeze never mentioned going to get one out of the portal. I think he's happy with the guys that are there. And there's 2 guys there with some great speed, some great size. So why? This is where you're going to have to cut down on some of those guys so you can build the other part of the team better.
There's going to be a lot of moving and shaking on both sides of the ball come Saturday. It's going to be a lot of fun. Again, auburndaily.com is the place that you need to be. We will be hitting on just about every single quarterback that breathes on Saturday in the transfer portal. We're going to be talking about all different kinds of players that the Tigers may be taking a look at or need to really be taking a look at. So again, auburndaily.com is the place that you need to be headed to on the weekend or now. If you feel like it, I'd encourage you at any time to be checking out auburndaily.com. So that's our thoughts on what we need, or what Auburn needs, out of the transfer portal this weekend and for the next 2 weeks, I would say, while this window is open. The second topic of today's episode, I want to kind of dive into something that you wrote about, Matthew, and then kind of give our perspective on it, give our predictions here, if you will, for the back half of this episode about Auburn and their expectations for the 2023 season. Before we get into that, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at Prize Picks. This season, Auburn Daily has partnered with Prize Picks to bring some fun and variety to the picks for 2023. And in case you did not know, Prize Picks is a free app that allows you to choose any 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 players from any sport in your wagers, and you can predict the over or under for the next game and win big prizes if they do well. They also have flex options where you can still get paid winning only 3 of 5 or 2 of 3, and you can have multiple sports in the same parlay. So, for instance, you could have, I don't know, a Braves game perhaps going on, and once the NBA playoffs happen, or tip off, I should say, this Saturday, you can have two different over-unders in the exact same parlay. I was doing that last year, and I'll do the exact same thing this year. A lot of fun over at Prize Picks, and you can use promo code Auburn, AUBURN, to receive double on your first deposit up to $100. Again, that's promo code Auburn for double on your first deposit. Really appreciate Prize Picks for sponsoring today's episode. All right. Matthew, you wrote about something that Paul Feinbaum commented on just about a day ago over at auburndaily.com. Feinbaum hopped on a local radio show to kind of give his thoughts on Auburn after the spring game, and he was pretty cut and dry, as he always is, about his thoughts on things. And he said, I think my expectation for Auburn is still the same. They still need a quarterback. He said, I talked to Hugh Freeze on Friday before the game, and you could tell he was saying the right things, but deep down, he knows quarterbacks, and he knows he doesn't have a quarterback on his roster that's capable of getting Auburn out of the morass, if that's how you pronounce that name or pronounce that word, that is currently into the next level. So I think he'll be pretty active in the portal. That word morass there, you pointed out in the Discord just a couple of days ago. That's not a word that you see people use very often.
Well, I guess when you're going to say something that everybody else has already said 20 times, you better throw some $10 words in there too, if you want to make that kind of money, right?
Yeah, this one's actually worth 36 points on Scrabble, but people don't know that. But yeah, so Paul Feinbaum essentially saying, yeah, his expectations haven't changed for the Tigers because they haven't gotten a quarterback, and they've not gotten a quarterback out of what they currently have on roster, at least in his opinion. If you want to read that whole piece, see what Feinbaum had to say overall, again, auburndaily.com. You can go check that out. But what I want to do here, the exercise that I want to perform today, Matthew, is something that you and I, Harrison, Lindsay, Dillon, the guys here for the Auburn Daily Show are probably going to be talking about ad nauseum through August, July, and heading into September, whenever the season actually kicks off. Give our very, I think, shallow thoughts on what this transfer portal, or excuse me, what this schedule could look like for the Tigers following this transfer portal window. And so what I want to do here is kind of focus primarily on giving our thoughts on the SEC games, because to be completely honest with you, the non-con schedule is kind of this year. It's not a whole lot there. You start the season off with UMass. You have Samford as at homecoming 2 weeks later. The only game I think in the non-con slate that's interesting is the game sandwiched in between at Cal, September 9th. That game could be intriguing. Cal lost their quarterback to the transfer portal. They currently have one of the worst offenses in the Pac-12. Justin Wilcox is probably towards the end of his tenure as the head coach of the Golden Bears, if I had to step out and make a guess. But that's the only non-con game that I think is interesting. And then Saturday, November 18th, you've got New Mexico State between Arkansas and Alabama, and I don't see that game being competitive either. So I think you could probably, Matthew, chalk those 4 games up to wins, if you would feel comfortable doing so. And then after that, we can kind of continue along after September 16th and give our thoughts on the rest of the schedule.
Outstanding. And let's say right ahead that this team's going to turn over 15 to 20% of their personnel between here and fall. So don't take these guesses. We'll say that. Don't take what we're saying here and go to Prize Picks and try to make money off of it, because you're probably not going to be successful. Yeah. The California game, you glossed over it, and I agree with you completely what you said, but it provides one thing that does lead into the SEC schedule for Auburn. It's a long road trip to a hostile environment. California has plenty of distractions. It's going to be a good thing leading in to go into Texas A&M. I still think they win that Texas A&M game because it's Texas A&M. Texas A&M loves to, for some reason, to lose to Auburn and beat Alabama, and I'm here for it. And I think that's going to be the first win of the season. However, that's going to be followed up by 2 quick losses, I believe, to Georgia. I believe that game will be closer than people give it, just because the SEC is going to be a little bit down, which means we're going to be still this far above anybody else. But the quarterback situations around the league it's kind of sketchy, if you ask me. Georgia, Alabama, things of that nature. But I still don't think you can have the depth to fight with Georgia, even no matter what they bring in. It's just not going to be there yet. And then I think you and I both agree that LSU is probably going to be a loss at LSU.
Yeah.
If for no other reason than, we're not very good at LSU since Tuberville. So we have what, one win at LSU since Tuberville?
I
Wanna
believe
say
so, yeah.
yeah, I think
2021.
yeah,
People forget.
Malzahn, didn't he? Didn't he pull that one off?
I do believe it was surprisingly Brian Harsin that actually made that miracle happen. And
So, yeah.
I feel more it was Bo Nix that pulled that off, who is now currently at Oregon. So we'll chalk that win up to a win for Bo Nix. I know wins are not a quarterback stat, but I think in that case it probably was close to it, if not definitively the QB win there. But yes, I agree with you. Texas A&M. Listen, I know Bobby Petrino is probably going to do some fun things with this Texas A&M offense this season. Would love to see a quarterback step up for them. Until that happens, I'm not really going to be predicting them to do a whole lot past what they have done in the past, which is 8-4, 8-5. I just need to see that offense click with all that talent. So I think that's a win for the Tigers. I think Hugh Freeze gets the best of the Aggies on the road. Georgia, this feels like a game, Matthew, to kind of quickly tie it back into what we were saying about this D line. I don't think this D line is going to be awful this season. I'm just saying maybe this is a game early in the season where you see Auburn. And it's like, okay, Georgia didn't have to throw with Carson Beck. We thought that may be an issue, but man, they ran the ball really, really well and just kind of controlled the pace of this game. And Hugh Freeze and the offense just couldn't really get into it again because of all the talent, like you mentioned, that Georgia has on roster across the board. So I think that could be a loss there, likely a loss. You got a bye week in between the game to Baton Rouge with LSU. I think that's a loss.
Yeah.
I don't really see Auburn. I don't want to say competing in that environment. I'm just saying I think that's going to be a very fun game, I think, environment wise for LSU, and it's going to be tough for Hugh Freeze and the Tigers. And then after that, you've got two home games against Mississippi schools. You've got Ole Miss and you've got Mississippi State. I've seen some people highlight this Ole Miss game, Matthew, as one of the must-win games, so to speak, for Auburn this season with their schedule. This is going to be a fun one. It's the Lane Kiffin Hugh Freeze Bowl. If you've got a better name for it, please throw it out there. But I mean, there are storylines on storylines on storylines in this one, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
How about coaches who are going to be ex Ole Miss coaches or are currently ex? Anyway, we'll leave that alone. Just to reiterate on your Georgia topic there. Yeah, the Auburn defensive line, but man, can they not with this defensive backfield make Georgia run? But the problem is, it's Georgia and they can run the football. But we're totally in agreement against, like I said, LSU. That's going to be a loss. It's not going to be a blowout, but I think it's going to be, you're going to have a hangover from losing to Georgia and leaving it all on the line. Repeating ourselves here. Ole Miss, I see what you're saying. I get it. The quarterback, the freeze, the build up. But what happens every time Coach Kiffin gets in one of these circumstances? He likes to talk his smack, get your popcorn ready, and this kind of things, and then he gets his tail whooped. I think Freeze is going to have enough for it. I think Auburn's going to have enough, especially defensively, to shut down whatever quarterback they put on the field. They're going to feel a good football team this year. They're going to be better than the Aggies, but I still think both Ole Miss and Mississippi State are Auburn wins. Period.
Yeah, Auburn almost got the dub last year against Mississippi State in overtime with that team. Enough said. I mean, I appreciate the effort that Coach Williams kind of instilled into his team for that one. That's a game Hugh Freeze can win at home against Mississippi State. I don't want to say comfortably because I don't want to be so wrong and see what happened in 2021 happen again to the Tigers. But yeah, those two teams. This has been a consistent topic of conversation for me back when I was doing radio at ESPN here in Auburn, and whenever I've kind of had conversations with Zach and with different people on the Auburn Daily Show. You've got different levels of talent in the SEC. To your point, Georgia and Alabama right now, I mean, they are right there at the very top when it comes to talent acquisition. And then you've got your middle of the program, middle of the pack schools, and then you've kind of got your schools that are like slipping or trying to gain some traction, and then you've got your Vanderbilts and Missouris of the world, right? I hate to say that about Missouri because they had like a top 15 class just a couple years ago, but it's still that's what their program is known for. It's just not being elite talent wise. Ole Miss and Mississippi State are rungs underneath Auburn. here in this equation. I think even in Auburn's down years, they're going to be rungs underneath Auburn, which just shows, even with a horrendous coaching staff last year, Auburn was able to be very competitive in that Ole Miss game, despite what the final score indicated, and took Mississippi State to overtime on the road with that team. So I agree with you. I think the Ole Miss game is going to be a lot of fun. I'm intrigued to see what the defense does against that Ole Miss defense, or Ole Miss offense, excuse me. Like you said, Lane Kiffin, not really prepared for these moments at times. It feels like, maybe a little too much butter on his popcorn and he can't hold his play sheet straight, looking at the wrong things there. But Mississippi State, I just don't have a lot of confidence in them with Zach Arnett in year one. I mean, looking at his track record, people herald him as some elite defensive coordinator at San Diego State. I remember writing about this whenever Auburn was looking for their DC before they hired Ron Roberts. I would have taken Arnett. Absolutely would have taken Arnett. But as far as head coaching goes, I'm not sold on what he's going to be able to do for this program. And on top of that, his defenses were not elite at San Diego State. People get the wrong idea. That was a clock controlling offense that SDSU ran, and that defense was good. I love the 3-3-5. We stand the 3-3-5 here, but that's not a defense that I think is going to be all world. I think it'll be good, but I don't think it's going to be all world. And then you have to question, what does Will Rogers look like in a non-air raid system? Are they going to let him throw the ball around a lot because, he's the veteran guy there? They're going to try and tailor the offense to him and what they have on roster. There's so many questions about State and not enough answers right now that I don't think it's fair to sit here and say Auburn loses with the right quarterback in year one of Hugh Freeze at home against this year one Mississippi State team.
No,
I
different levels of class there. You're exactly right. Arnett could be a great defensive coordinator. I'm not sure he can be a CEO in the SEC. We're going to find out.
Yep.
He's going to have to turn over the reins. And once again, that's one of those I have chalked up as basically a non-con game. I don't believe that they really can come in and compete. Ole Miss is going to compete. We'll see. I might be absolutely wrong about all of these things, but I just don't see Mississippi State coming into Jordan-Hare and putting a whooping on Auburn. Just don't see it happening. So you tell me what your thoughts are on Vanderbilt and Arkansas and the team that we do not speak of.
So this Vanderbilt game, remember that game in 2016 where John Franklin had to start because Sean White's shoulder was still messed up, and we ended up winning that game like 23-16. Cam Petway pulled his hamstring on what should have been a touchdown run. Yeah. A lot of weird things happened in that game. Sean White came back in at one point and threw the worst touchdown pass I've ever seen in my life. I love Sean White to death, but that was bad. It was bad. And it's just like, why are we competing like this with Vanderbilt? Shout out Kyle Shermer, by the way, just random note. But I feel like this is one of those games where it's like you have the better talent, you have the better team, you have the better coach, you have the better staff. It's going to end up like a rainy day in Nashville, and it's just going to be like all bets are off. I think Auburn wins this game. I think they win by somewhere between 4 to 10 points, but I think it's going to be one of those games where it's just like nobody's going to be enjoying it. I don't know why. I've just got a very weird feeling about it. I've just got a very weird feeling.
So what you're saying is they're going to be so tired from this string of actual SEC teams that when they get in front of the 71 Vanderbilt fans that are going to be screaming their heads off, they're just going to fall apart a little bit and let Vanderbilt stay in the game. Well, that's a brave take.
And I will say this, you talk about Auburn having a really tough, not tough, just a difficult time in the SEC before they get to that Vanderbilt game. Vanderbilt's 3 games before they play Auburn: at Florida, Georgia, at Ole Miss.
Yeah.
So, and again, you may say, well, maybe they're a little bit beat up too. I don't know what it is. But Clark Lee's bald head is shining brightly in my mind right now, and I just don't see this being like a blowout for Auburn. I don't know why. Just it all signs point to it being a probably decided win for Auburn, but I don't know. I just got a weird gut feeling about it. And then you talk about Arkansas, man. I mean, what a weird year for Arkansas last year. They got KJ Jefferson back. This is going to be a retooling year for their defense after having one of the worst secondaries in all of college football last year. Might have been the worst in all of college football last season. They're going to have to figure some things out to kind of get back on track, because I know Sam Pittman had a first couple of really solid years with the Razorbacks, but again, you talk about talent acquisition, you talk about gap between these programs. I think Auburn again is above this team. And I know what they did to this defense last year, but does that happen again with a different scheme, with different players added in, with a better secondary
Better coaching
situation,
staff.
better coaching staff? I think that's probably one of the bigger focus points now that you mentioned that, Matthew. But yeah, it's a game on the road. I don't know what Arkansas is going to look like at this point in the season. They'll have already played at LSU, A&M, at Alabama, at Ole Miss, at Florida right before this game too. I mean, it's going to be another, I think, interesting year for the Hogs, and where Auburn falls on the schedule is probably not the most favorable. It may be a little bit more favorable for Auburn considering they will have just played Vanderbilt the prior week.
And then staring at New Mexico State the next week, basically.
Yeah.
Arkansas, if you check the message boards, if you look around Twitter, Arkansas is a team that a lot of folks picked to beat Auburn this year. I don't know why I'm with you. I think they're a level below what Auburn can bring, and I just there always have been. That was until you show me. I'm gonna stick with what I know. They haven't shown me. I mean, I don't forget how many in a row Malzahn won against them. He just owned them every year, and I think that continues. But I want to go back to the whole what you're talking about, the levels. We have Georgia, and I think we're going to start seeing next year. It's going to come back to be the same four that we've always talked about: Alabama, LSU, Auburn, and that's going to be the elite of the SEC until somebody comes along and plays different. And I like how you keep throwing Florida in there as a tough game for these guys, but I think Florida, Vanderbilt right here, Vanderbilt's going to have. I think they're going to have a winning season.
Vanderbilt did beat the Gators last year.
Yeah, exactly. And Gators, I don't really see them being all that much better, and probably worse. They've made some awful. We're not like, well, we won't get into that. But I also want to say that Missouri's a tough out. Missouri has their best team in a decade. I mean, a lot of people are sleeping on those. Now, I'm not saying they're going to come up and beat, but they're going to get somebody a handful. And South Carolina is too. There's going to be one game. Like Georgia's got to have a little run of somebody who might take them out. I think they show up with one loss at the end of the season. But once again, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, I think these are both Auburn wins.
This is very, very, very off topic. Talking about Mizzou, they get Kansas State at home, they get Memphis, they get LSU, they get Tennessee, and they get Florida at home. I mean, we'll see what happens with the Tigers.
They're talking bowl game, man. They are speaking bowl game into existence, and so is Vanderbilt. So we'll see.
Going to be a very interesting year for one Elijah Drinkwitz. But you look to that final game there, Matthew, for Auburn here. It's the team, like you mentioned, that shall not be named for Auburn in the Iron Bowl here. The Crimson Tide. I'm gonna give my sales pitch, and I think you're gonna counter me here. I think it's going to end up being somewhat similar to the Georgia game. I'm not saying that Alabama's going to run for 300 yards and have 45 minutes in time of possession. If Jalen Milroe is the guy this year, does Alabama focus on the run, on the ground game a little bit more than maybe they have in years past? Do they become a little bit more controlling with a quarterback that has that skill set? And what does that look like against an Auburn defense that, last season was really bad against the run? And so far, we haven't heard a lot of promising things, or at least we haven't seen a lot of promising things out of what this unit could do, stopping the ground game next season. So this is just a long projection out. I know that you have the entire season at this point to get better on that D line and in that linebacking core, kind of making tackles, cleaning things up. But I just don't. It's that paired with the fact that Alabama has, I think, a higher talent level. It's at home. It's the Iron Bowl. Anything can happen. I want to see who the quarterback is. I want to see what he looks like at this point in the season for Auburn. What are the stakes in this game? I think that's going to be a question as well, both for Bama and for Auburn if somehow they have another miracle year. But I would favor the Crimson Tide in this one, and I don't think it's crazy to think otherwise. But I would favor Alabama right now.
I mean, you got to go with your gut, and most people in the world are going to agree with you at this point, and probably at that point. I think we both see LSU winning the West next year. I mean, I don't know what your opinion is on that, but I think LSU wins the West. So I'm going to go completely different. I'm going to assume that this coaching staff teaches the defensive line how to tackle. Okay. And I'm going to assume we got a quarterback like we have on all these other things here. And I'm going to throw all that out the window and say there's one game circled on Hugh Freeze's schedule for this season. It is his Super Bowl for this year. He knows he's not competing for a national championship. If we're all being honest. And I think he has it in his head. He's right to some extent. To build a dynasty, to get the recruiting, he has to beat Alabama this year. I think it's that important. I think he would, if he was to look at the schedule, and he's not going to do this and go, okay, I would give up a game. He'll take the Georgia LSU loss and maybe an A&M loss and still put the best product humanly possible to beat Alabama. At home, Jordan-Hare, you got to hope that's a night game. I'm actually going to step out and pick Auburn here, not just because I'm being a homer. It's just it's that important to Auburn's future as far as Coach Freeze. He's already mentioned he wants to whip Nick Saban in the Iron Bowl. So I believe him. I believe that's his goal. He's sitting there today. That's circled 4 or 5 times in his calendar is November 25th, 2023, of where his program actually starts to make that pivot turn to be back to that legendary top 4 status we were talking about.
And something that, we haven't mentioned here yet. I mean, Hugh Freeze, outside of Gus Malzahn in the past decade in the SEC, I mean, he's had the second best track record against the Crimson Tide.
He's never lost to Nick Saban, has he?
I want to say
at Alabama.
At Alabama. Yeah. I want to say in 2012 and 13 he did.
Okay.
And then in 16 they lost a game that they were up in. I remember watching that. I remember they were up significantly. So it's like a 2-3, or 500 record for Hugh Freeze. But hey, look, not a lot of coaches beat Nick Saban in back-to-back years. Yeah. Not a lot of coaches have 2 wins against Nick Saban. Period.
I thought it was better than that. My bad. I really did.
So I think that with arguably a better talent roster and a more intense environment, I would say than anything that Ole Miss could put together ever. I'll stand by that. Auburn's got a chance in this one. And if Alabama plays like they did on the road last year, this is a game that Auburn can take. And like you said, it's so important for what Hugh Freeze wants to do with this team and this program moving forward. I think Auburn's going to be playing. Again, I go back to what are the circumstances in this game? I think they'll be playing at a high level. Duh, it's the Iron Bowl. But what the stakes are in this game may make it more important to Auburn. Maybe even if it is just to knock Alabama out of the SEC West race. Maybe it is just to give them that loss that really puts the nail in the coffin and lets LSU take it. So it's going to be a very entertaining one. I believe 24/7 Sports already has it as like the 5th most intense environments this upcoming season. Like everybody knows it's going to be going down in Auburn, Alabama, the final game in November, final regular season game in November. So it's going to be fascinating to see what that looks like. So that's our schedule there. 10-2 for Matthew Jacobs, 9-3 for me. I think that both of those would be just incredible seasons. Bowl game pending. At that point, I would only imagine in your scenario, Matthew, that Auburn would be getting a New Year's Six bowl, or at least something very close to it, and maybe possibly in my scenario as well, depending on how bad the East is. But I'm not protecting them to be bad. I'm just saying if they kind of cannibalize themselves like the SEC West did last year, we would see maybe Auburn rise to the top there. So that's it. We ran extremely long today. I just looked over and see that this is 43 minutes long. So that's going to do it for today's episode of the Auburn Daily Show. You can follow the show on Twitter at the Auburn Daily. You can follow us, all of our written work, at auburndaily.com. Follow me on Twitter at @LanceDawe_. Follow Matthew on Twitter at _Matthew Jacobs _. We will see you all tomorrow for another episode of the Auburn Daily Show. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day.